The engine of my old sedan purred softly as I rolled into the diner's parking lot. It had been one of those mornings long, exhausting, and completely uneventful. The kind where the coffee barely made a dent and every stoplight seemed to drag on forever. I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary today, just a decent meal and a brief escape from the monotony. That is, until I caught a glimpse of flashing lights in my rearview mirror. It felt like something straight out of a pulpy crime novel, except this was too ridiculous to be thrilling. I wasn't being pulled over by a regular cop, that would have been too logical. Instead, it was a vehicle sporting the oddest logo I'd ever seen, HOA enforcement. And if that wasn't strange enough, the officer stepping out of the car carried herself like she was the embodiment of justice. Meet Linda, the HOA enforcer who'd somehow said herself she ruled more than just neighborhood lawns. I eased to a stop right in front of the diner, the neon sign flickering overhead, indifferent to the absurdity playing out below. Linda strutted toward my car like she owned the whole street. I half expected her to slap me with a fine for existing too loudly. When she reached my window, I couldn't miss her pristine uniform or the permanent scowl etched across her face. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" she asked, her tone icy, like this was a routine shakedown instead of some bizarre overreach. I glanced past her at the diner. Inside, a couple of sheriff's department vehicles sat parked, and through the window, I could see officers gathered around a table, eating and chatting like it was just another day. "Honestly, no clue," I replied, hoping she'd wave me off so I could grab my lunch and forget this ever happened. But Linda wasn't about to let it go. She leaned closer, eyes narrowing with every syllable. "You were parked too close to a fire hydrant," she declared, as if I'd committed a felony. I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Right here in front of a diner full of sheriffs?" I nodded toward the window. "You sure they back you up on something this petty?" Linda didn't blink. "I'm the authority here," she snapped, tapping her car with a smug thud. "I don't answer to anyone." The irony hit me like a brick. Here was a woman with a badge that looked like it came from a dollar store, writing tickets in full VOW of actual cops who were too busy with their pancakes to care. Something was seriously off, and the more I thought about it, the more it felt like a punchline I hadn't figured out yet. Before I could stop myself, I shifted the car into park, flung open the door, and stepped onto the pavement. "You know, I don't think the sheriff's department would appreciate this," I said, keeping my tone casual but with an edge of defiance. I wasn't looking for a brawl, not really, but Linda's arrogance was starting to grate. She stared at me unfazed. "I don't appreciate people questioning my authority," she shot back, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You should have thought about that before parking near a hydrant." I let out a dry laugh, more out of disbelief than amusement. "A hydrant? What's next? A citation for not trimming my hedges?" Her eyes twitched, a fleeting hint of something guilt, maybe? Crossing her face before her stony mask snapped back into place. But I wasn't done. "Linda," I said, letting her name drip with sarcasm, "don't you find it a little weird that the sheriff's department is right there eating lunch while you're out here playing traffic cop? Doesn't that strike you as off?" Her gaze flicked toward the diner, and I caught the subtle stiffening of her posture. The sheriff's vehicles, the officers inside, it was all suddenly a problem she couldn't ignore. She turned back to me, voice steady but with a faint waver. "I'm handling this. You can stay here or I'll have your car towed. Your call." I didn't answer right away. This was turning into a bad TV show, and I couldn't tell if I was the fool or the hero. But as I glanced at the sheriff still chowing down, oblivious to the scene outside, I knew this wasn't just about a hydrant or a ticket. Something deeper was at play, and I had to dig into it. With a grin, I said, "You know, maybe we should take this inside. I'd love to hear what the sheriffs think of your style." Linda's face twisted with irritation, but I didn't care. I strode toward the diner, fully aware of the mess I was stepping into. The sheriffs were right there, and if Linda thought she could dodge accountability, she was in for a surprise. She stood frozen for a beat, frustration and disbelief warring on her face. But when I pushed open the diner door, the air grew heavy. This wasn't just about a citation, Anna Marie, it was something bigger, something darker. And as I stepped inside, I knew I was about to unravel it. A wave of warmth greeted me, laced with the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee. It was a no-nonsense joint, the kind where you go to eat and get out, where the only drama is overcooked eggs. But today that small-town vibe felt like a lie. Behind the counter, a weary waitress scribbled an order, while a handful of sheriffs lounged in a booth by the window, swapping stories and laughing. They barely noticed me come into cozy in their little bubble to care. For me though, this was a reckoning, and I wasn't leaving without answers. I walked past the sheriff's booth, trying to play it cool despite the tension in my steps. I wasn't here for a burger, I was here to figure out what Linda was up to. She might have thought she could scare me off with her fake badge, but the whole setup reeked. Why was she harassing people while the real cop sat here ignoring it? It felt like an unspoken deal to keep the peace or avoid the hassle. Well, I was about to stir things up. I slid onto a stool at the counter. The waitress poured me a coffee without a word and shuffled off, either too tired or too wary to engage. My eyes stayed on the sheriffs. This was my shot. One of them, a burly guy with a thick mustache and a strained uniform, was mid-story about a lawnmower theft chase. The table chuckled, but I wasn't here for laughs. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and strolled over, leaning against the wall near their booth. "Hey," I said, keeping it light, "what's the deal with that HOA lady outside? She got some special permit to pull people over in front of the diner." The laughter stopped cold. The mustached sheriff looked up, his face tightening. "What's that?" he asked, his tone too smooth, like he was dodging a fight. "Linda," I said, as if she were just some nosy neighbor. "She just pulled me over out there. She's not a real cop, right? Is there some rule letting her play traffic cop?" A heavy silence fell. A younger sheriff with cropped hair and a sharp jaw shifted in his seat, eyes bouncing between me and the others like he was debating whether to speak. The big guy cleared his throat, sizing me up. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you saw, but Linda's not someone to tangle with. She's got her job, we've got ours. Drop it." I held his gaze, letting his words settle. "Drop it? You're telling me you know she's out there ticketing people for nonsense, and you're cool with it?" The young sheriff piped up, voice shaky. "It's not like that. She's just doing her thing. Sometimes she goes overboard, but no one's hurt, right?" Frustration surged, but I kept it leashed. "She's harassing people. She's not a cop, she's a glorified parking monitor with an ego. And you're all letting it slide." The mustached sheriff's scowl deepened. "You don't know what you're talking about. This ain't your business. We don't owe you an explanation." That snapped something in me. "Not my business?" I said, voice rising. "It's my business when she's bullying folks while you sit here eating like nothing's wrong. You think that's normal?" The room went quiet. The sheriff swapped uneasy glances, their casual vibe replaced by doubt. They knew I was onto something, but no one wanted to admit it. The big guy stood, chair scraping loudly. "Watch your tone," he growled. "We don't take kindly to troublemakers." My pulse raced, but I didn't budge. Maybe I care more about people than your rules. "So, Sheriff, what's really going on?" The air thickened. Then, like clockwork, Linda appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking like she'd been waiting for this. "Well, well," she said, her voice syrupy with mockery. "Looks like we've got a little problem, huh?" I turned to her, anger flaring. "Yeah, we do." The sheriff shifted, sensing this was spiraling. No one spoke, but the cracks were showing they didn't want to face Linda or her overreach. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a ticket or a power trip. It was a town too comfortable with letting small abuses slide. Today that was going to change. I took a deep breath, ready for the fight ahead. It was time to force the truth out, whether they liked it or not. The diner's tension was electric now that Linda had stormed in. The sheriffs avoided my eyes, acting like they weren't part of this mess. But I knew they were just as guilty. The longer I stood there, the clearer it became this wasn't a one-off. It was a pattern, a quiet abuse of power everyone had ignored. Linda smirked at me, stepping closer. "You've got quite a mouth, don't you?" she said, her condescension thick. It was the same tone she'd used outside, the one that screamed she wasn't used to pushback. I didn't flinch. "I just want to know why you think you can stop people and hand out fines like you're a cop. What's your game, Linda?" Her smirk faltered, her shoulders tensing as she tried to hold the reins. She wasn't used to this, someone like me calling her bluff. The sheriffs knew what she was up to, but they'd never had the spine to act. Maybe they feared the fallout. Maybe they just didn't care. The mustached sheriff coughed, breaking the silence. "Enough," he said, gruff but uneasy. "Linda's doing her job. No need for a scene." "A scene?" I shot back, incredulous. "You've let her harass people for months, and now you want me to shut up? About what, a fake ticket?" His glare hardened, but I saw the fracture. He knew the more he pushed, the more eyes turned our way. Linda stepped closer, eyes slits. You don't know me or what I do. Maybe you should back off. That's when I caught Ida flicker in her gaze. Not just arrogance but fear. She wasn't just bullying me. She was hiding something big. I leaned in, voice low. You can't keep pushing people around, Linda. You're not a cop and you're not untouchable. So what's the real story? She flinched just a hair, but enough. I'd struck a chord. The mustached sheriff saw it too, his eyes darting between us, torn between stepping in and letting it unfold. The waitress froze mid-pour, watching wide-eyed. The other sheriffs buried their noses in menus, pretending not to hear. Then the young one spoke, voice soft but steady. You're right, he said, staring at Linda. You're not a cop. What you're doing out there, it's wrong. Linda spun on him, face flushing. What are you saying? She snapped, but her bravado was cracking. I'm saying, he pressed, voice firming, you've been stopping people for nothing, handing out tickets that don't matter. And we've all let it happen. He glanced at his colleagues. We knew it was off, but we stayed quiet. That stops now. Adrenaline surged through me. This was a truth breaking free. It wasn't just my fight anymore, it was the town's. Linda's face contorted with rage, but she was cornered. The mustached sheriff sighed weary. Linda, he said, you've gone too far. We can't ignore this anymore. Step down. The room held its breath. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it, the weight of defeat sinking in. The young sheriff had lit the spark, and everyone felt it. This wasn't the end, but it was a start, a crack in a broken system. As I stood there, I knew I'd help tip the scales. For once, I was on the right side of something bigger. The silence was suffocating as Linda faced the mustached sheriff's order. He hadn't said much, but his tone carried finality. The young sheriff's words hung heavy, and the others couldn't hide their discomfort anymore. Linda stepped back, chest heaving, trying to retreat from the mess she'd made. Too late. The damage was done. The young one glanced at me, a mix of relief and nerves in his eyes, like he couldn't believe he'd spoken up. I gave him a nod, silently urging him on. She's done, he said, turning to the big sheriff. We can't let this slide anymore. It's been happening right under us, and it's time to end it. The mustached sheriff's brow creased, unaccustomed to this pushback. He'd coasted on inaction too long, but now he had no choice. I'll deal with it, he muttered, resigned. Linda, come with me. Her defiance flared briefly, then faded to fear as she realized no one was backing her. She followed him out, the diner exhaling as she left. The remaining sheriffs sat stiffly, their unease plain. They weren't saints, but they couldn't unsee the truth now. I stood there, mind reeling. I'd come for answers about a petty ticket and stumbled into a reckoning. This wasn't over. The sheriff's department had a mess to untangle, and the town would have to face its complacency. The waitress caught my eye as I turned to leave, a faint glimmer of hope in her gaze. She'd seen it too. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was stirring. Outside, the air was crisp, the weight of the day heavy on my shoulders. My fight wasn't done. Linda was just one piece of a bigger puzzle. I spotted an old sedan with an HOA enforcement sticker, a reminder that the problem wasn't gone. I smirked faintly. This wouldn't be my last stand. For now, though, I'd made a dent, stood up when it mattered. And maybe that was enough to spark real change. The future was murky, but I was ready. One voice, refusing to stay silent, could shift everything. And I wasn't backing down.